That I'd like to call to order the special planning board meeting, or planning board special meeting for today, February 17th at 2 p.m. here in the town of Sunset Beach Town Hall. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance, seeing that we have a quorum. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Thank you. And again, seeing we have a quorum, we have a draft agenda before us. Does any of the planning board members want to amend the existing draft agenda?
I'd like to perhaps address we're about to embark on a long and arduous.
We're just talking about the agenda right now.
And I'd like to maybe perhaps do a few minutes on some house rules in terms of how we conduct these meetings.
Okay. I was going to ask Wes to give us, once we get through with the agenda, to launch off with some opening statements.
Okay.
Which I was planning to do. Yes.
If that's, Richard, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Any amendments to the draft agenda? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it is before us. We have that motion.
I so move.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And just the path that Richard was starting here, this is obviously a key time in the planning board's work with the UDO rewrite. I would like to ask Wes to kind of briefly give us an overview of the expectations and the tasks that are going to be before the planning board here, and specifically to maybe differentiate the difference between phase 1 and phase 2, so that we on the planning board in this phase 1 time don't get too far into the weeds and overcomplicate the process. Wes, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also thank you, board, for agreeing to realign the schedule. I do apologize. And thank you for meeting this afternoon. So when we last met, we talked about some of these procedural items. But now you guys are in the thick of it. So now the rubber is starting to meet the road, if you will. So first off, as Pete alluded to, there are two phases. The first phase is the code audit. You are starting to receive those materials. You've received a portion of the code audit. That code audit, we're going to go through all of the general code and the entire UDO section by section to whatever detail we like. The goal of this code audit is, hey, Wes has gone through the UDO, staff has seen things, you all maybe over time have understood things that are important to you. They're all now out on the table. Wes maybe sees something, hey, I don't know, this conflicts with this provision, or hey, this provision says this. Are you thinking that this is something that it still aligns with what the town wants to see? None of this in the audit is going to make it into the UDO unless ultimately during the drafting of the UDO it makes it in there and you approve it. These are thoughts, matters, points of discussion, ways that we can start to build some consensus so that, let's say we don't have the code audit. Let's throw phase 1 out. Phase 2 is drafting the UDO. Our first meeting here, we'd be starting and you guys would have received draft UDO material and you're saying, hey, well, how did we come up with these changes? Who thought this was a good idea? And so this is part of the building block. So we're going to go through the entire UDO. There may be some things I say, this doesn't make sense. You guys say, yes, I think that makes complete sense. Wes, I don't know why you thought X, Y, Z. And vice versa. There may be some things where you guys say, hey, absolutely, I think we should do that. I would say, I think that's a good idea. But remember, there's an administrative issue with this, or there's a statutory issue with this, or whatever it may be, so that when we go to start drafting the document, we've already fleshed out a lot of things and that we can sort of make progress. You will then get, as part of phase 2, we'll go through, you'll get article by article, and there'll be some larger articles that you'll get pieces of. And so you'll get draft material. We'll have an article, and there'll be strike through and underline material. And so you'll see things, hey, that portion, that section, whatever it is, 2-22, we talked about that in the audit, and we identified that as something that needed to be changed. And so this is really the introductory process. It's helping us all understand what it is as that's important for us to accomplish. Procedurally, how we interact, how we proceed, this as we move forward, the audit phase really is about discussion, building consensus. Anything that I say in here, most of the language is consider, recommend, so on and so. The only thing that I will ever say that has to be changed is something that is in conflict with statute. So I am not a policy maker. That's you guys' job. You guys are the ones that are saying this is the policy we want. I will say statutorily you need to change this, and then I'll also make recommendations about from an administrative standpoint. Hey, this doesn't make sense for you guys to facilitate this development rule this way. You may want to consider changing. I'm not rewriting this. We're doing this together. Does that make sense?
It does. Does anybody on the board, I'm sure they do, we do, have specific questions for Wes before we get into the weeds? Richard, start with you because you asked the question first.
I mean, and these are some basic housekeeping questions. I mean, this is a process. I mean, we could probably be here all day.
We will.
And I'm going to suggest that we have a standard policy that the meetings will last for 2 hours. And at the end of the second hour, if we wish to proceed, a motion requiring unanimous consent can add an additional hour to the time that we spend here. Having been in these kind of things that can drag on for 4 or 5 hours, my sense is that the quality of the work curve tends to deteriorate once you get to 3, 4, and 5. So I throw that out there as a recommendation and would be interested to see how the board responds to it. The second question I have is clearly there's going to be red lines in this. Is that how this is going to be done?
It's part of phase 2, yes, sir.
Okay. So the question then becomes, who owns the master document? And how do we differentiate that Richard's seen the master document? These are the red lines or the suggestions that Richard has suggested. They can be ingested. These are the red lines that Pete may have suggested, and keep those. So now when we go back and look at the revised document, we can go, okay, well, this is an issue that Richard raised. This is an issue that Sybil raised. Is that something that can be done, or are we going to kind of have to do this on the fly?
So let me answer your first question. I absolutely agree that when these things go on beyond an hour and a half, 2 hours, it starts to be the point of diminishing returns. So we'll need to weigh that. I mean, when I've done these in place, in fact, the last one we did in Southport, they had a pretty hard, fast rule. We're going to stop at 2 hours because after that, everybody's fried. Second point, the whose red lines are what. There's going to be things that all of us disagree on. Ultimately, you guys are the ones that, as a board, has to come to consensus on a particular item. Just the same as any other amendment. We've gone through this before. Last time I was, here most recently, we had a slate of amendments related to MR3, and there were differing opinions on what should be done, this, that, or the other. And that's why you guys are made up of 5 members. So there may be times where you need to bring something to a motion. Hey, someone thinks that the flagpoles should be, I'm just giving you an example, 80 feet. Another person says 60 feet, and you guys may have to bring that to a vote. I will have notes on what needs to be changed. We'll go through the entire document. You will get all draft articles, 1 through, I think we've got proposed to have 7 articles, and then you'll get a master document that will be, once we go through the whole thing, that will incorporate all the changes based on all of the draft material at the end. They'll-
Wes, can you answer his question about the redlining? I think it's dangerous to have 5 different
No, there-
documents
no,
out there
there
that
should
we're all
not-
redlining.
that-
It's-
Yeah, I
that-
mean, is there going to be, I think he's asked, is there going to be a master collaboration document? I mean,
No.
I don't know what the town uses
No,
for a
you have
system.
I have it, and that's the other reason why we have hard copies, so we're not flipping around digital copies, and we understand everything will be dated also, and so that there's not confusion over who's what.
in draft.
In draft, yes, sir. And so there will only be, the dates will change, and that's it. And I will have that on our server,
And in the draft, I mean, in the paper draft, because typically in a situation like this, the document would be returned with the area that has been eliminated crossed out, but still in the draft.
yes,
And then the substitute red lines so we can identify
yes.
this is what we're eliminating, this is what we're changing, this is, I mean, is that how the
Yes,
paper will come to us?
So deleted material will be double strike through. I'll give you a style guide when we get to the point of developing the new material. Deleted material will be double strike through, red, and then new material will be underlined, also red.
Okay.
And there will be times when there will be new material suggested that gets also deleted as well. So it is a tedious process. It's also going to be important for our clerk here. The key things, and I mentioned this at our last meeting, when there are points of contention, for example, on changes, we need to make sure we've got clear minutes of those. If it ever comes to the point of, hey, I thought so-and-so was said. The other great thing about this, and now the past couple of years, almost every meeting is recorded, so you can go back if we have forgotten something. And I am not perfect, and I am quite certain I will forget something along the way, but I will do my best
To keep on Richard's
Yeah.
topic, would we vote on, even in phase 1, as a board, on, let's say somebody says driveway should be abolished.
Yep.
Obviously, they're not going to. Wow.
Yeah.
Would we vote, and then would that vote be a permanent part of the record?
Sure.
But the strike-throughs or the changes would be the majority.
Yes, yes. So you guys could say that we should abolish driveways, and if we got into discussion about it, you can say, I make a motion that we abolish driveways. In the draft, you'll have that it says we should abolish driveways. But then you may think, wait a minute, that wasn't a good idea. We probably shouldn't abolish driveways, and we may need to, we come to a consensus, and obviously we need to change.
But we're not going to put everybody's ideas in the strike-throughs.
That's
For
right.
something as
That's
cut
correct.
and dry as abolishing driveways, I would think we would vote.
Correct.
And what would get in the record is what the majority.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But then
that's
you're
right.
saying we will have a second time to look at it.
Absolutely. You're gonna have plenty of times to look at lots of documents, because you'll get the initial draft document, then you'll get a fully revised document. That won't be it. Then you'll get another fully revised document, likely. So, and possibly a third, depending on how long it takes us to get it out of the planning board to the town council, which then I don't know how many versions they're going to require of it as well.
But all these iterations are not going out to the public.
They're available, but it will be up to council and you all. What I typically recommend is that when you're pretty close to feeling comfortable with it, for example, we've gone through all the articles, you've been given all the draft material. You guys may say, hey, look, why don't we go ahead and post this onto the website? We know it's maybe not perfect, but it's pretty close. We got some tweaks here and there. That's up to you guys at your discretion when you post it on the website.
But not in process, meeting by meeting by meeting.
No, sir.
Okay. Richard, anything else that you
No,
want to?
I mean, if as long as we have, a distinction in terms of the red lines, what was eliminated, what's been added.
Yeah.
And that is a single thread. I mean, that's fine. I just, in things like this, if you don't do that, you can kind of go back and go, well, wait a minute, I thought we changed that. No, we didn't. But there's no way of really verifying it other than go back to the recording or some other. But if it's redlined,
Yep.
in the way that you described, I think that'll be fine.
Richard, I made a note here about your meeting duration, and we'll talk about that after everybody finishes their
Okay.
conversations. Ron, anything that you'd like to?
Well, I guess my understanding, we're basically doing all this on paper.
Yes. Hard copy versions. Yes.
No electronic collaboration by statute or
No, just by my experience in doing this now for quite some time, this is the best way to handle it. We don't have to handle it that way, but I have seen projects go right down the drain when folks take things out of context, and there'll be months and months of time that has been spent that will go just in the trash bin, and that's fine. I'm not suggesting that will happen, but it comes a time where we also got to remember we're bound by a certain amount of budget and time.
Okay.
We start expanding this out, we'll be here forever, and I will be gone.
To specifically address Ron's point, I think you're saying that we on the planning board have to verbally insert our comments to
Yep.
you at a meeting.
That's right, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Open meetings law. We're here discussing this.
Now, is
thing.
there a way for us to, through Chad and
Yes.
as a board, to insert things that we think of after a meeting?
Absolutely. Please do send
And
comments.
Chad,
to
can you help us facilitate something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And so that we all know what a new, Ron could come up with an idea tonight that he missed today, and I'd like to hear that.
Yep.
But we'll have to figure out a way to facilitate that then. If you could think about that a little bit,
Yep.
Chad.
Yeah, he can get he will just forward the comments to me, and
Okay.
then I'll be sure to bring them up. I mean, we're supposed to discuss the business of the town in this room.
Yes. Sybil?
I had something to say and now I've forgotten. I know, Ron, in reference to that, I find just personally, I like to have a hard copy because as you will see, I'm a note person and I need to have them with the thing. And when I do it on a computer, then I can't find it. So, and I guess it's just because I'm old and I'm not that used to computers. So,
Old.
so
Sybil.
that's just my comment.
Gary?
One thing from the legal standpoint, when are they brought into the process?
Pardon who?
Our legal counsel.
Whenever you guys want to. I know the town attorney very well, and so if there's things that I'm not comfortable with, but he'll review it prior to it being adopted. But if there's things that we get to, you guys ask, hey Wes, can we do this? I will correspond with him or school government or other resources we have, make sure that we're not running afoul of some statute.
We're paying the Council of Governments to help us with this process and the legal implications and statutes and the interpretation. So we work with Wes on a number of things.
Yes.
number of
And
projects.
Jerry, to
Well,
piggyback off of what you asked, town council always has legal representation to part of their meetings or closed session and stuff like that. So when it gets to that point, if it doesn't get to the legal counsel before, it will definitely get to him at the point where it goes to where it's after it's been recommended from the planning board to council.
I guess to summarize in my own head, phase one that we're going to go through, and we're going to go through all the articles as a phase one project in segments, is to identify inconsistencies, to highlight things that we feel need to be changed, like driveways eliminated. As an
As an
idea.
example,
That's so absurd that I've
Right.
used that several times. And that phase two is where the updated definitions, where the rewording of the UDO and the municipal code really come into play.
That's right.
Now, I've got a question about municipal code not versus, but in conjunction with our unified development ordinances. Obviously, the town and our citizens are affected and regulated by our municipal code and our unified development ordinances. And then in addition to that, different POAs or HOAs have their own covenants which further restrict.
Correct.
Or can further restrict. What I've always had trouble understanding is a difference between the municipal code and the UDO, and I was pleased to see you in the initial document that you sent to us indicate several times that the wording in the municipal code needs to be brought into the UDO.
Yes.
But what is the difference as far as the town is concerned? Why does there need to be two documents?
Well, in a lot of jurisdictions up until, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, when unified development ordinances became popular, everything was in what is termed the general code of ordinances. And so you had all these codes that we referenced, and then you would have another chapter for zoning and another chapter for subdivision and another chapter for whatever else it may be. Folks feel like have popularized unified development ordinances where everything is under one roof or supposed to be in one roof. For example, you guys got a UDO, but you didn't put in your street standards. That should have gone in there. So, it just really depends on each local jurisdiction's preference. I will say that there's certain things that you can regulate in the ETJ from a development standpoint that the general code cannot regulate. Certain enforcement cases, nuisance cases, things like that don't apply to the ETJ. The ETJ is really there for planning and development regulation, not other matters. For example, you're not sending police out there in your ETJ. That's county.
Sure.
And so that's
So the UDO applies to the ETJ, but the municipal code does not.
no.
Thank you.
In very rare instances, but yes, that's the key piece. So there's stuff we need to bring into the UDO.
But there's other county regulations that would affect the ETJ that might be
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, that's all I had from at least an initial launching standpoint. I found the structure of the input that you gave us was easy to go through. I particularly like where you showed our UDO right now has 13 articles in it. And for efficiency purposes, rather than having to go from one block to another to figure out an answer to something, you have restructured, and I like that. I think that'll make it easier on staff and town council and planning board. All right, how do we start? Do we just go right from now? There's going to be things that you did not address as we proceed through these articles.
Yep.
And that would be our obligation as planning board members to insert ourselves into that conversation at that time. And as Sybil just said, she's a paper person, so and I can see she's gone through UDO in order. I think one other point we talked at the last meeting, particularly where we have two new planning board members, about not interrupting each other. There's going to be conversations back and forth like Ron and Sybil just had, which are healthy.
Yep. And
you don't want to interrupt that. But if somebody is making a point, we need to let them make it and either raise your hand or somehow get somebody's attention so you can then insert your specific rewording or conversation. Now, a lot of this, as you started with the general code, as you call it, the municipal code, as I had referred to it. And a lot of this is administrative kind of stuff.
Correct.
Which, like you're talking about it's really not the CAMA land use plan. It's officially called something else.
Yes, correct.
But and we obviously need to reference it as would be appropriate. Chad, what would you suggest? We just start right in this list in the order in which it's presented and insert our comments appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, if that's how Wes wants to proceed.
Yep.
Start with section 30 and
Yep.
go right down the line.
Would it be necessary for you, or do you think it would be necessary, like section 30.39, section 12, or article 12? do you need to tell us why? You don't need to do it for me because I went and looked at it and I saw it and I said,
Understood,
I don't
yeah.
have a question with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you guys. We can go line by line, but if for expediency, we want to start and say at the top of page or on the middle of page 2, if anybody has questions, and we can handle it that way.
Okay.
That-
Sure. What does the rest of the planning board
And
think?
Mr. Chair, before we get there, I will say that Wes and I have talked. If we do not get through all of this today, that is fine.
Yep.
Okay. Well, with that being said, Chad, I'll look to you for guidance here. I think Richard made an excellent point about duration of meetings. Before we get 2 hours into this meeting, how about if we decide as a board what duration meetings that we feel we can tolerate? And I think the proviso that Richard added with a unanimous vote, we can add an hour at a time to that.
I would be happy to make that motion.
Please.
I move that we limit the duration of the UDO meetings to 2 hours. And if we're on a roll and want to add more time, that it would require a motion with unanimous consent to proceed for additional hour.
I second that.
All in favor?
Any discussion, first of
Any
all, excuse me.
discussion? Sorry. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for bringing that up, Richard. Okay,
Thank me later.
now we'll launch. And we'll get better at this although as we get into the UDO, it becomes more and more complicated.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're going to go over the general code audit summary first.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have 2 housekeeping things. How do I get on the internet here?
You use my computer because it has it memorized.
That's the phone
I
number.
see
think.
Sunset Beach.
Well, you don't want to say it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
We're back on.
Let's wait until he finishes that way he can hear your
Oh,
question.
I go through
Specific
the
one.
list. Got it. Okay, and then I can look it up here. Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're resuming the meeting. Ron, you had a question?
Question or a thought, I guess. On this general code audit summary,
Yes, sir.
I mean, it sounds like we're just going to go line by line, but my thought, and maybe I should have brought it up before the meeting, is normally planning board has no involvement in the general code, the municipal ordinance. But because here we're trying to make them the same or whatever, to be correct in what's where and what, I understand why it's here. But I guess instead of going line by line, I thought, I mean, we have Dustin sitting here and I don't know, stormwater. It seems like most of this applied to public works, stormwater, and a little bit on planning.
Enforcement.
So just like when a development is approved, have they gone through all of these and have any objections to it? Because some of this is kind of things that
Sure.
apply more to the departments.
Yes.
So the 3 of them
So
have gone through everyone, and there isn't one where they don't agree that
The,
I mean, we can certainly talk about ones that we don't agree with or whatever, but
sure.
if stormwater, public works, and planning says there's nothing in this list other than this that we don't agree with,
So this is the first iteration. The as we move forward, we will, and I think as I alluded to in here that several of these items we need to confirm, are good with Public Works. Public Works is also here,
right?
and he's got a copy of this as well.
Right.
and
It seemed
so
to me that the three of them needed to.
they've
If they
got-
just got it today, I guess there's nothing we can do about it. But that is there any non-concurrence from public works, stormwater,
I
and
don't know,
planning on
Dustin,
any of these items?
anything that you have issue with that was mentioned in any of the general code.
In fairness, Dustin
Yeah.
just got the document
Yeah.
this morning.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's so be it. That's just that my thought was because I kind of
Sure.
assume that at the end of this package of changes goes to council
Well,
separate from the UDO.
No, this is not going to go to council. This is just
No, the ordinance changes have to. They have to make the ordinance
it
changes.
will way down the road.
Right.
th-
They're going to get a bucket of ordinance changes, and they're going to get a new DO to look at.
Yes.
Okay.
It-
And you probably vote on it and get it done at the same time or try to.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
It
So
just
that they work
depends.
together.
Our first goal is getting the UDO rectified, but yes, there'll be a number of these changes that move through the code also.
But-
And as we go through this, there's going to be some things that we talk about that also will involve Dustin. He's also here today,
Right.
About when we need to figure out how to do inspection on new roads and all these other sort of how are we accepting new roads. Those are things that you all need to be in agreement on. He needs to be in agreement on all these things. So and some of those are identified here.
May I have a question?
Well,
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
you're finished.
I-
Yes.
I'm a little confused about the municipal code. You said some places had municipal code and the UDO, and then a lot of them have made them all into one. So what we're looking at today is not making it into one. It's to determine if we're okay with one, and then determine if we're okay with the UDO.
So there's a number of items that are still in your
Yeah.
general code, municipal code, whatever you want to call it, that never made their way into the UDO that need to be pulled in there. They need to be pulled into the UDO because they impact development.
Oh, good.
And so that we need it all under one roof. There may be places that still remain in the general code, but at a bare minimum, we need to provide reference to the UDO, to the general code, and vice versa, so someone would know, hey, this provision is in the UDO, or this provision is in this chapter in the general code.
Okay.
That
So-
seems like a double work. Just
It-
saying.
No,
Well, we got two documents, so it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Right. One of the, I didn't want
So-
to step.
So we can't change that.
Yes,
We
yes,
we
we can.
can't recommend that this.
yes, you can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
But it will be something that the town council will get
Sure.
together. It just,
Why?
their authority is to change the UDO in the first place. But we've made, even since the last couple of years, we've made some changes to the municipal code
Mhm.
by unanimous vote by the town council.
Okay.
And then the municipal code has then been amended to reflect that.
Yep.
It just needs to be legal as to
Yep.
what you're doing. It's,
Correct.
So, quick question. So there's no issue with there being some redundancy between the UDO and the general code. But if it's not in the UDO and it's in the general code, we need to fix that.
Yes, or at a bare minimum, we need to make sure that there's
Reference.
something in the UDO that tells us that there's this other thing over there too, so that it doesn't get forgotten. Does that make sense?
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, your point, the municipal code doesn't impact the ETJs.
Correct, and that's why anything that is in particular zoning related, especially, needs
Needs to come over.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I had not, I'll maybe
Sure.
try to start getting in
Yeah.
getting in some progress.
Sure.
I had no, I had nothing on the general code until we got up to section 97.07,
Okay.
where you had recommended that review display of goods provision and place ordinance language in UDO. And I strongly support that. I think our sidewalk displays, what's allowed, what isn't within our UDO is not clear to our commercial brothers and sisters here in town, retail in particular, and that our UDO needs to be more specific about that. I'm not sure that we would know even how to enforce something like items for sale out in front of your storefront, except if it's Christmas trees at Food Line. We've got some little tidbits of stuff that's allowed and other stuff is not.
Yep.
But we don't enforce it. And I think it's because it's not clear in our UDO. So I just made a statement under section 97.07 that we need to see that the UDO does properly reflect our wishes when it comes to retail displays, particularly out in front of retail properties.
I think that's a very good point. And in the material you'll get today, we start going through the use table. And in your use table in the UDO, you have bunched together outdoor display and outdoor storage. Those are completely different things. They need to be separated. Outdoor display needs to have its own provision, time, etc., location, amount of space, and then outdoor storage needs to have its own category, and that's identified later on. But yes, that's a good point.
But we're not tackling that article today.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But yes, absolutely.
All right, for the record, I
Yep.
just wanted to make
Thank
that
you.
note. And I guess if we can kind of proceed in order, does anybody have anything in before section 97.07 that they want to get something in the record? I agree with Ron about the beginning of chapter 98, particularly 9802 and 05, really has to do with our Department of Public Works. And so that would be something that at Dustin's leisure, that he and Matt can sit down and go over, those types of things that are probably outside of our purview.
Well, they are to some degree. So, for example, 9805, the way that you all regulate streets here, in my opinion, is overly complicated.
Mhm.
Yeah, you base them on the number of dwelling units, which could change over time, and so you're trying to hit this moving target. This really falls on the UDO administrator's standpoint. When someone comes in with a subdivision, we're trying to see, all right, how many dwelling units are there, and are they going to use this road? So do these dwelling units count, or it's impossible? And this makes sense for DOT, maybe someone doing a TIA, but for the town, we need, in my opinion, you need to establish minimum right-of-way widths, minimum pavement widths, and things like that, and then go from there. And I think Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd probably be in favor of that as well. Yeah.
All right, well, how can we facilitate that? If we're not going to be doing it or providing direct input from up here, can we be assured, Chad, that town staff is looking at really everything?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, and that's where it comes into the meets the standards of the UDO before it comes to statement that we've worked with, such as subdivisions.
Dustin and you would know the Achilles heels,
Yeah.
particularly in the light of recent development where you've said, oh boy, that does conflict.
Yes.
yes.
And that's where it comes into. I look at all that, especially Dustin and I, especially when it comes down to TRC. That's where staff looks at it, and all department heads look at it. Mainly, fire, public works, police, but it really comes down to fire.
But that's
And
on a
public.
project by project basis.
It is, but I also look at the streets on every one of them too,
That's right.
to make sure they meet the standards of the ordinance,
Mhm.
making sure that the houses that are on that, going with the number, I have to comb through it, and it's like, okay, this meets the definition of a collector street. Collector streets have to be this wide with this, this, and this.
Is the planning board comfortable with that process? No, I don't want to get into shoulder widths and asphalt roadway designs and graded aggregate base depths, structural numbers of roads. That's something that is outside of us.
Well, but it's going to be if it gets pulled into the UDO,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, and it should be. And what we
So the UDO, in this case, definition of the type of roads needs to be
Yes.
specified, and then the technical minimum requirements of the type of roads needs to be specified. So what you just said is going to happen.
And so, yes, and typically what occurs is that local governments will default to the NCDOT minimum standards, which you can do. That's an easy thing to do. Some folks allow for alternatives so long as you've got minimum depths, installation depths.
And you've done that in your suggestions here several times.
Yes, and so we can, and this is where I mentioned, as we move forward with the process and if we include specs, we'll make sure that Dustin's good with it, and you guys are good with it, and understand from an administrative standpoint, when you guys get a subdivision plat, it won't be based on, for example, some dwelling units. It'll just say, have they met the minimum right-of-way widths? Have they met we want to make it simpler for everybody, because right now, it's not very simple.
What are the different types of roads we're talking about?
Minor,
No, well,
Right now,
right now.
in reality, not right now.
Okay.
Where are we trying to end up with the number of roads? 3 classifications? 5?
I
2?
said two. Basically, what if you want, you'll have if you want to allow for this, a private type easement road that would serve 4 lots or less. That's an option. Outside of that, you're pretty much going to say, hey, we're comfortable with the cross section of the road, the installation
For
specs,
NCDOT.
and a right of way widths, and from there, let the developer kind of move on and spec their own road types, rather than I believe that your current provisions are overly complicated and frankly very difficult to administer.
Dustin? No, you don't have to get up.
Yeah,
I'm
get
just
up.
saying,
Tell us what you
Dustin-
said. Why don't you just tell us what you have Dustin
I think
give us
Wes just teed that up for you. This is your opportunity to get something that is manageable for you, because you're the one that has to, staff looks to you to say that road works or doesn't. And so this is your opportunity to give us a design.
I have 17 different classifications on roads in the town of Sunset Beach.
17?
17, and every one of them has. So, for example, a minor.
And this is roads in residential areas.
Correct. We're not building new
It
cities.
seems to me
is
there's
the way
only 2
that-
types of road in a residential area: a residential road and one that kind of main drag, whatever you want to call it.
And it comes down to, so you've got a minor, you've got all this different stuff, but it really comes down to what Wes is getting to, is that you have private streets. Unless the town is taking them over, then at that point they'll have to meet a specific type of road standard. If that makes sense.
Well, we'll get into that too. From
Yes.
my perspective, you always, even if they're going to be private, you need to make sure that they're built to town specs, because there will likely come a day when they want to get them accepted.
And most of that is accepted, pushing toward everything being built to NCDOT standards, because
that's the default,
That's
and
the
you can
default.
fall back on that as a town. You can have more strict.
Well, I'm going to ask about something specific. I live in Sea Trail. One of the first developments that Riptide built within Sea Trail was the houses that are kind of up against the driving range. And there's a major road that goes through there. And then there's a little side road that all of the driveways filter out to. And that road is only one lane. I mean, if 2 cars want to get past each other, they're out of luck.
It's a one-way frontage road.
Yeah, but there's no one-way sign.
Yes, and that's one of these funky. I think that's a marginal access street, or something, some iteration like that. That
we would hopefully simplify and
correct.
prohibit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
But-
not necessarily prohibit. It may be the smart thing to have because of the traffic flow. It just has to be designated and built properly.
Yes, and so sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sylvan.
But isn't this something we should be discussing and tearing apart when we get to that?
Sure, I think we're
Well,
there. I guess
there.
we're on.
We're
We're
on the
on.
item.
Simply because of the municipal code.
Yes, and so that the section of street and sidewalk width is in 9812. We can talk, about that if we need to. That we may have been skipped ahead too far here, but
Well, I was only at 9707, and then we started into chapter 98, but we hadn't.
Can I make
Kicked it yet.
can I make a suggestion? I mean, from a cursory examination of this, there's things on this general code and audit summary that are their language, they're not really
yep.
affecting anything. And I think we can knock those out. And then the ones that do require us to review the UDO, place as, okay, we're going to go through the UDO from top to bottom. Let's make a mental note that here are the 4 things off of this list that we're going to address when we get to that point.
Well, I think we're doing that, but
Yep.
you're right.
Yep.
We're addressing the fact that the
Yep.
types of streets need to be either simplified or made positioned such that they can in fact be enforced and understood.
Yeah, but what I'm suggesting is let's identify this as something we're going to have to fix, and it occurs in Article 6 that we'll get to in 3 meetings.
A while.
Okay, and meanwhile, we can so for instance, section 30, 39, and the first 3, we all agree these are semantics. We can approve those, and then table the ones that are going to require significant examination of the UDOs, but do them in sequence. My fear is we're going to hopscotch over the UDO in terms of these general code issues,
Sure.
where we could just say, okay, in terms of the general code list that we have, because to be honest, I've been through the UDO in terms of Article 1 through 5 and gone through all the drafts and everything. I have not gone through the general code summary in terms of what that implies. So maybe I'm a little unprepared, and shame on me. But it seems to me that we could take this issue and say, okay, we understand we've got to resolve this.
I think Wes has been making notes. I've been watching him as we've brought things up.
Yep. So yeah, let's see if we can just get back on track. So 9805, we staff has pointed out that perhaps the way of regulating streets is not the best fit for Town of Sunset Beach. Is there a big disagreement among this board on that standpoint?
No.
Okay.
Not
Good.
from the chair. Anyway.
Okay.
No.
Then I think that what we'll come forward with new recommendations, and we will talk that will also be fleshed out with Public Works, and when we get to that in the UDO. So that gets us onto the next page. You've got a number of administrative issues here where you got stuff in Chapter 8, and then you got other stuff that's conflicting in the UDO. That needs to be fixed. Those will all be brought together in a line.
I have something on 98.07.
Okay, go for it.
If I might.
Yep.
The alignment of driveways. Our UDO Article 2, existing 2.14, deals with driveway widths. It deals with joint driveways. It deals with driveway separations on duplexes on BR1 on the beach on Main Street. And I'd like for the record to say that I believe that we need to address that, particularly in the light of our parking issues on the beach on Main Street, to either discuss in the future having an overlay district on Main Street that would give us some authority to stipulate differential parking on that road that would not necessarily apply to the rest of Sunset Beach municipality as one item. And I believe because it's addressed in 98.07, I believe the driveway widths and joint driveways should be investigated, and that in those duplexes, a 10-foot separation with two 20-foot driveways is really overkill from both sight distances and form and function. I'd just like to put that into the record on 9807.
807. And then on Main Street, what you're alluding to, I think, is that are you saying that there should be a provision that limits the driveway width so that folks can have parking or vice? Okay. Yeah.
Specifically.
Yes. So that people don't just make a wide driveway so no one can park in front of their house.
And it may be in the town's best
Yep.
interest to have an overlay district so
Yep.
that specific requirements can apply to that area of Main Street
Sure.
in BR1 that would not necessarily be appropriate in other parts of Sunset Beach. So we wouldn't want to impose those types of restrictions elsewhere.
Yeah, I drove down Main Street today, and it was,
Well, it's 70 degrees out.
I know, beautiful.
Anybody else have anything in these as we proceed through? I don't want to. Ron?
I guess, sorry, maybe I'm operating in slow mind today, but backing up on streets. So my understanding of what we're doing, we've made the decision that the streets are going to be completely moved out of the municipal code and put in the UDO. We've agreed to that, correct?
It sounds good to me.
Okay.
We hadn't officially agreed to that,
And
no. But
to get there, these gentlemen here and folks are going to review the existing standards and basically rewrite a section
Correct.
for streets and roads and walks. Maybe sidewalks should be with that section, I guess, maybe.
Yep.
And create a new, and I was just looking at the proposed organization. Would that be something in Article 4, another section?
That would be in, yes, that would likely be, most of that will be in Article 4.
So we would have Article 4, Section 4 called Streets, Roadways, and Sidewalks.
Yes, and there will be pieces, there may be some pieces in Section 4 of Article 3 that address driveways.
Mhm.
For example, driveways are, more in tune with zoning. You're not doing a subdivision to get a driveway. And
Right.
so there'll
Okay.
be some of the road stuff that will also go.
So
Yeah.
just want to make sure I knew what
Yep.
we agreed to, that all the street stuff, road
Yep.
stuff, and sidewalk stuff that currently exists somewhere in the municipal code is going to be scooped up.
If it's development rate related. So if there's
Well, yeah.
penalties for damaging a sidewalk, et cetera,
Yeah,
things like
okay.
that. But
The
again,
construction of one.
largely Chapter 98, it's
Right.
it's going
It's
in.
going to the UDO.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Then I just want one thing on the
Yep.
record that everybody knows is my pet peeve on private roads is, and I don't know, I guess you can answer me the question, are we allowed to do that, is that when it's a private road that's going to be maintained by the homeowners, that those terms, conditions be in the covenants published to the homeowners.
Yes. So we're and frankly, we can talk about private roads if you want right now because it's going to be or not. We will talk about private roads on and off for the next 10, 12 months, 14 months, year. So
well, give us some education.
yeah. So there are various differences across our local governments on how they want to permit private roads. Many local governments have been burned by allowing a private road in HOA. HOA is not paying attention, they don't care, or they just think it only costs $12 to maintain, 4 miles of roads. Well, come to find out, you better multiply that by 10,000, whatever it is. And then they come knocking on town hall door and say, our roads are not working, you need to maintain them, we pay taxes. Well, you agreed to maintain those roads, it's not our responsibility. And that is fairly prevalent. No matter if you say it's on the plat, it says this is a private road, it'll never be maintained by the town, it's in the HOA covenants, whatever it is.
Well,
And-
my first problem with the whole private road thing is when it's not even in the covenants.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had other guys stay here, and I always bring it up to them. I want it in the covenants
Sure.
that
We
you
can't
as a
go-
homeowner are responsible for maintenance of
That's
the
correct.
road based on your prorated share, whatever the way assessments are done.
Yep.
So at least, I know the homeowners don't read that big covenant
Yep.
thing, but that's not, I can't help that. But at least step one, it's there.
Yes, so we can,
Can we influence covenants within a subdivision?
yes, we can require certain covenants and we can require as a condition of
Yeah.
private roads that they have
And then-
provisions
But-
for maintenance.
What about roads that don't have an HOA?
Well,
That's a whole nother issue.
That's a whole nother issue.
I know, but somehow,
Well, that's the question is,
in the town where people are building right and left on both sides of it on any empty lot, and here's this tiny little road, and nobody has responsibility for it.
Well, so if it's not a town road, it just evolved, it was a private road, whatever it may be, to be brought into the town, they have to petition the town, bring it up to standard. That's a whole nother item that we can talk about. Our goal is moving forward today, once this thing's adopted, we want to make sure that we're not creating more liabilities for the town. At least I think that that's what this board is wanting to do. And so if we're going to have private roads, is that fine? Everywhere can do private roads. Is there a limitation? We only want to allow, developments of a certain size to have private roads, or there's certain portions of the roads that need to be public, whatever it may be. And that we need to be very clear about certificates or on those subdivisions about what the rules are for that private road. So there's things that you all can determine. We've got a number of our communities that have taken stances that they want almost all public roads. So it doesn't create a situation where folks.
Are you going to make a note about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway.
Because that's complicated.
Yeah.
It's,
So we'll
but it's
talk about it
important.
over
And I
time.
think earlier we talked about that. To me, no matter how, if the road's public or private, that it's built to the public standards.
Yes.
Yes.
That would be
Okay,
my
that's
recommendation.
also
I
another.
totally agree.
There's like my step one to cover
Yeah,
the thing. Step
yeah,
two,
yeah.
it has to be built to the public standard
Yes.
It has to be maintained to the public
and
standard.
maintained to the. Well, you
See,
can't. That's on the HOA then.
That's correct.
Right.
Well, then don't
My
you,
way is, and way I come from is, not have private roads. But
And so
but
that'll
we'll
be
never.
something
That's never going to be a thing the town's going to want to do.
I don't
but,
think would go there.
Yeah.
It'd be,
but we also, and where I came from, had county roads
That's a different thing.
where they're.
So we'll be prepared
Find
to,
those in North
as
Carolina.
we get to drafting the portions of public versus private roads, be prepared to flesh out more on how you guys want to handle it.
Ron, and essentially this is kind of something we've talked about since I've gotten here. One thing that was on the future agenda item list, I know Jerry and Ryan, Richard wasn't here for that, but this is bringing Chapter 98 into the UDO as we've discussed.
we're going to we're going to address an awful lot of things that were on our shopping list here at the planning board during this iteration here.
well, I mean, sorry, but it looks to me like Section 98 is going to be a fairly robust discussion when we get to it in the UDO.
When we get to the locations within the UDO where it needs to be inserted,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
And there will be several. But
Yeah.
And if there's points, so all right, and Dustin, do you want to add anything to that amalgamation there? Okay, sorry.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is, and Pete, you're probably very sensitive to this, in terms of, ultimately, it's the town's responsibility in terms of emergency services. I mean, we just had an unfortunate incident on Market Street, and there are, for instance, on Fairway Drive east where I live, there's a home at the very far end of Fairway Drive East that's 50 feet off of the main road, and all that exists there are two little cement tracks that take you back to that home, and then there's Angels Trace Road. Well, I hope that guy never gets a heart attack, because, so the issue of emergency vehicle access is going to be part of this.
Yeah, and it's already a part of it to a certain degree, especially when we get into TRC meetings, when I meet with the fire marshal and the police and the fire chief, along with Dustin, but it mainly goes back to the fire code, is there are standards you have to live by already existing in that fire code, that roads have to, like, dead ends can only be X amount of feet long.
Right.
And alternatives for that, such as
But that's
hammerhead.
not something we have to cover here. That's
It will be
somewhere
covered, it
else.
will be addressed in your standards. Now,
Yeah.
the technical specifications, it's not typically something you would want to question because
Okay.
they're established by other codes, but
Yes.
they'll be in the UDO.
All right, great.
they're established by the state. And
Yeah.
then our fire inspector has to then monitor and enforce those.
And that becomes an issue where you can be more restrictive, you just cannot be less restrictive of that code.
So, well, you were
Yeah,
insert
I was
something.
just wondering, I mean, all of this is wonderful and all of this is really good stuff and it's stuff we really need to get into, but we're not staying on task of what we're here to do today.
Well, we're going in the order in which it was presented to us.
But you're taking each little thing and making it into a big discussion, which will have to be done later when we get to that part of the UDO.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to do is say, okay, I want to look at roads. We need to look at roads. There are a lot of things about roads we don't agree with, and go on to the next one or whatever anyone else has a question about.
Sounds good. So anything on 9808?
Not for me.
Okay. 9810 or 12? Um, 9813 or 9814?
I didn't quite understand that one. I'll be quite honest.
9813?
Uh-huh.
So it's unclear so let me ask from a policy standpoint of the planning board, and remember the audit section is supposed to encourage discussion here, but you don't have to. Is this board opposed to cul-de-sacs?
To what?
Cul-de-sacs,
Mm,
dead ends.
Dead-end circles.
There's 3 in my neighborhood now.
From a public safety standpoint, they're important. Turnarounds, rather than having to back a fire engine down, 100 yards down a road in the middle of the night. Cul-de-sac at least allows you the opportunity to make several 5-point turns to get back out again.
So are you in favor of, and here's what I'm getting at. So a lot of communities will have these what are called connectivity requirements. So whereas a subdivision could end their road with a street and end it in a cul-de-sac versus punching through to connect to the.
I thought you meant a cul-de-sac versus a dead end.
Sure.
Okay.
So is there a preference, on requiring folks to connect either a stub or connect to an existing street, or are you okay with cul-de-sacs?
Stubbing roads through is extremely important, particularly in mutual aid coming to a fire or a disaster where you need multiple ambulances.
Okay.
To have access egress from 2 different areas prevents that road from being blocked by, let's say, a ladder truck,
Yep.
and then nobody can get through.
Okay.
So connectivity is
Important.
important.
Yep. Okay.
I don't know that it is the end all, but it is extremely important.
Okay.
Well, let me raise an issue with that, because in certain areas, and Fairway Drive West is a perfect example. Now that ends in a cul-de-sac that's been severed from Angel's Trace Road for decades. And if you make that into a cut through, that's going to significantly impact Sugar Sands. And I can tell you right now that there will be a revolt.
You can't go back. He's not talking about going back and changing what we have.
No, just
He's
new
talking
development.
about permitting new.
Okay, great, fine.
Well, but sort of what his thought is, though,
But
there's
that's the point.
some
So-
places cul-de-sacs to reduce the
Yes,
traffic
that's right. So
flow is a better idea. I don't know how you get the balance on maybe it's how many of them are the distance from the main road. A cul-de-sac that's,
Or what, I mean,
way back from the main connector road or whatever you want to call it would be better off having its own connection. But if it's just,
or maybe you have a minimum, I mean, in terms of a turning radius, you set some
Yeah.
standards in terms
Yeah.
of how big the cul-de-sac. Oh, okay.
Aren't there standards for that?
there are.
There are.
We'll have
There's
minimum
desirable,
standards. Yeah.
like 50-foot. Is
48 or
Because I
50.
had the fire
common.
chief come
Yeah.
out and
Yeah.
check
Okay.
their cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
I don't know that you because you can't recommend, because the recommend is just a
yeah.
statement. It's not worth much air, but
I can see the need for cul-de-sacs in areas where there's not a connectivity. Okay, it's here, the river's here, or the playground's there, or something. I can see a need for them there. But I agree with you, when it would help with access from
Yeah.
point A to, to an emergency, then it should be continued, I think.
I mean, what do you say? Whenever
The-
possible?
No, well, see, that's
It's-
where
Yeah.
if you say whenever possible, staff doesn't really have a leg to stand on, because the developer does not want to connect through to that street.
Figure out a way.
That neighborhood that's already existing there that you're going to connect to, they do not want any additional cars coming in their street. It's typically the
point.
most controversial of items we have. Now, you have the authority to require that. People have gone a little overboard in requiring it in some of our jurisdictions where I don't necessarily believe it is important. For example, in Pender County, Brunswick County, where you're trying to limit access on major arterials like 17. Very important. We're taking a bunch of traffic off 17 so folks can move about. Here in Sunset Beach, you're not in the same type of environment. So from a planning standpoint, connectivity is maybe not as big of an issue. From a safety standpoint, it always remains an issue. The question is a safety issue more important than the revolt issue of running cars through an existing neighborhood?
Well, if we're just talking about new development, I think it's when you go back and try and have to change an existing.
But if that new development, you know,
But the existing development.
abuts an existing development, and you got
Exactly.
400 units, all of a sudden they're going to use a previous stub.
What does staff recommend?
I like the connectivity, but I think there's a time and place for it. For example, and I know the guy over my right hand shoulder is going to appreciate this, is you're allowed to have Sea Trail and Sanctuary and potentially Jaguar's Lair all have connectivity where you can ride a golf cart or a bicycle to Food Lion and the Mexican restaurant and, you know, those type of entities. That becomes a great thing and a markable thing for that whole, you know, think about our whole MR3 zone there. Especially along Angels Trace Road, if it ever came back online, to have a connectivity through there. Not to mention, on the safety standpoint, if you have a fire going down or a heart attack or some kind of drastic emergency that's unfortunate down one street, and all of a sudden people coming home from work can't get to their home, you now have hopefully some type of other access to be able to go in another way. It might take them 10 minutes longer, but they're still able to get to their home and they're not, you know, or if you have another emergency on the back end of that where you can also get. So that's where I think about connectivity.
Is there such a thing as like an emergency lane? That's only for
Well, you
emergency,
can increase the width of the streets. You can control parking on the streets. There's things you can
a couple
do
of years
to
ago, the fire
improve
code-
access during.
A couple of years ago, the fire code came up with something that was pretty controversial. I dealt with it first when I was with the town of Burgall, is that all subdivisions now must require two
Of over
entrances.
30 units. Yeah.
Over 30 units, all subdivisions must require two entrances or an exit. That way, if you have an emergency at house A, you know, and then you have where you're blocking up the whole entire entrance of the neighborhood to put out a fire or deal with some type of emergency. One, you're not cutting off the main artery, the whole entire neighborhood going through it for people just getting home. Or if you have another emergency that you need to deal with at house ZZZ in there as well.
How about a suggestion that we make a note that connectivity cul-de-sacs is important, and it's an item of discussion with pros and cons.
Yep.
And if town staff could investigate by talking with local developers as to practicality.
I will say
issues.
this, and by no means am I trying to create a collector street plan for this town.
What?
A collector street plan.
Collector Street. Okay.
So I'm not trying to do that. I think connectivity, I mean, our whole overlay district requires connectivity. I think there's a time and place for it. On the island, you're not going to get much connectivity.
Well, it's already connected.
It's already connected. It's there, but I'm just saying, but there's a time and place for it.
Yeah.
So-
So I wrote down that we'll continue to require connectivity. When we get to the draft section, we'll talk about it more. Because I think that's you guys' preference. All right.
9815 was the next one I had. I think you would finish with 14.
Yes, sir.
And I very much I'd like to make the term or make the statement, rather than having our town administrator review alternate designs or cross sections. I think it's extremely important that they be required to, with an additional fee, to be an independent third-party engineer. I think we need to get to the 20th century. Something might look good on paper, but we need a professional to look at it.
So this would be a requirement rather than simply desired.
Yeah, Wes has suggested that this be done, and
Okay.
I wholeheartedly agree with it.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, 9818 is key to our prior discussion, which has to do with public streets and when they're accepted by the town. There certainly does need to be a time frame, and Ron brings up a point not that we have on a private, if a developer decides to make a private street and the people buy into that, knowing it's a private street, that kind of removes our obligation to police that, if you will. But does need to be a time limit. You suggested a 1 year, which I think is appropriate. But,
Okay. Dustin, are you good with that?
Yeah.
It's gonna be public 1 year. Okay.
Yeah.
And Ron, there is a bullet there under 9818, the second one, which gets right to your earlier point.
you stopped at 9819.
And so, and it's going to go back to, unfortunately, the connective one, because you could end up having connectivity of two private streets. So who pays for the repair of that road?
I would have to see, but
So-
I think oftentimes we don't require them on private. But I would need to go back and research on how that would.
I mean, you
occur.
could have two developments next to each other with separate private roads, and if you decide that you want those connected,
Yes.
so now is the connected part
Well, if there's
in one of the HOAs or the other, or is that
Right.
now shared? private?
This is where it gets to be
Right.
complicated on knowing and potentially requiring a public access easement over top of private road. And so this is why I said that we'll be talking about private roads on and off for a number of months.
Yeah,
But we will have a provision in there to help address exactly that.
right, because, you know,
We stopped here at 9819. I had an issue with section 99 that you hadn't gone to. And is there a reason why we might not have gone further into the general code? Well, I can tell you what it is.
Yes, please do.
It has to do with our town park. It has to do with regulations within our town park. And something that's always been unclear is whether skateboards, bicycles, rollerblades are appropriate for our park, and whether the citizens want them in our park.
Sure.
And it does in 99.22, and I guess just a note that we might want to revisit this for a wording, maybe Dustin would be involved with this. 99.22 talks about under engine power, not allowing skateboards, bicycles, but that to me isn't the point, whether it's a motorized skateboard or whether it's a hoverboard or whether it's a rollerblade. I think we need to, as a planning board and then a town council, decide what do we want our park atmosphere to be? Do we want it to be skateboards, rollerblades, bicycles, or do we want it to be a walking park?
And I think that's a great discussion, but that would be one where that wouldn't be necessarily, a regulation of land or development. So it would be outside of the purview of the UDO. Luckily for us, I'm sorry, Pete. That's why I didn't put it in there.
Yeah.
But that really gets at the heart of what if you allow alcoholic beverages on the beach or what
Right.
things like that.
but how would
rules
how
and
would
regs.
some of that occur to inside a development if they were making a trail?
Well,
In other words, if they had a recreational or open space with a trail,
A multi-use street.
would we then in the UDO cover like the width of that trail if it's going to be used for
we can
wheeled vehicles? Does
we
it have to have a 2-foot lane just for the wheeled vehicles versus the pedestrian?
We can specify widths, and then it would default to what you're allowed to put. The town's got rules in place on whether you're allowed to ride a bicycle on a sidewalk, for example,
Right.
things like that. Then those rules would come into place. You guys would be the provision of, okay, you have to put a multi-use path or a sidewalk or whatever it is, and then the riders, et cetera. That's a whole separate item that would continue to stay in the general code that's enforced by police, et cetera. Anything you want to add on that?
Okay. I
just have one quick question. Sorry, Pete.
No, it's your meeting.
Section 9819, remove section redundant. What is it redundant to from?
It's repetitive.
Storm drainage. Yeah.
Storm drainage. We've got other sections that address exactly this. So,
Okay. Got it. Okay.
You should have a copy of that. It should have been placed.
Yeah, I
in the
just
desk.
saw it now. Okay, great. All right, thanks.
All right, now we enter into the actual UDO, unless somebody has any other comments or concerns about the general code?
I just want to make sure that we have a list of the items that we said we're going to get back to. Are we clear on?
Well, you'll get back to them by virtue of the fact that you're going to get draft material, and you'll see. Oh, this was what we came up with connectivity.
Well, I'm keeping track of
Yeah.
my points.
Yeah.
But I can't necessarily keep track of everybody's points.
Got it.
So I think the burden would probably be on us to say, Wes, didn't you remember we talked about?
Correct. And I'm making notes
Polishing
here
driveways.
too. Yep. Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, and starting, a lot of this beginning section 1 really has to do with administrative topics, administrative language. You want to launch us off into that? I alluded to the comprehensive plan as opposed to the CAMA land use plan, but our document does say 2017 CAMA land use plan.
Right.
And I couldn't find it where it said comprehensive plan anywhere on our document.
That's okay. It's just the statute now specifically references comprehensive plan. You guys can call it whatever you want, but the official terminology from an ordinance standpoint. And that's also because, say you do a plan next year and you call it 2023 Sunset Beach Land Use Plan, then we wouldn't have to go back and change the ordinance from CAMA Land Use Plan to 2022 Sunset Beach. We just call it comprehensive plan. It'll be good to go forever.
Okay.
No matter how many.
Does everybody follow that?
Yep.
That makes sense to me.
And you'll hear me reference it as the future land use plan, the comp plan, the CAMA land use plan. I don't know what other words I've used for that book, but
Yes, Article 1 is largely administrative items, clerical things of that nature. We can start, Section 1, Section 102, Pete made the comment. Questions on Section 103 or 104?
I followed what you had and it made sense.
105, I really didn't understand what you were saying there.
Sure.
Permit rules per ones that are applicable without this language, consider removing this section.
Didn't we just make a major revision in 160D to
Yeah.
the entire UDO?
Yes, we did, and we were only going and doing 160D items, but this is always one that I felt has been problematic in your UDO. There's nonconformities, vested rights that are established by statute, permit choice. It's established by statute, and so really, to me, that this doesn't need to be in place. You've got state law that regulates this already, and I think it just has a propensity to complicate something should someone have a claim to make.
Okay. Did that answer your question? Right? Yeah, the 109 planning board signature, that's something that we never have done anyway. So it's for it to be in there was not going to be followed. We're here too.
Anything on 110, 111? There's a large section on 112.
I have a question on 112, maybe not a question. Yeah, question on 112. And this occurs in two places, I guess. The last item there concerning penalties, criminal versus zoning, and then over in 3.21, replacing criminal penalty with civil fines. So what I gather from both these sections is we have some, are we saying there's some criminal penalties in our current UDO
That are not appropriate.
that are not appropriate? We're saying that all penalties will be civil penalties, fines or whatever that we're trying to get to on both these sections?
Is that
Yes, there's Senate Bill 455. I can't recall exactly what the title was, but it was decriminalization of minor, infractions or something to that effect.
Right.
And there was a number of preemptions that said that, things that you guys have criminal penalties in place for, you need to no longer allow that. It needs to be only civil fines. One of those being anything that's enacted under Chapter 160D, which is a little bit odd because there's other things in Chapter 160D that I don't think that they quite that they perhaps looked over. But the statute says that, so we've got to decriminalize
Right, so-
our
So any-
enforcement
So any
penalties.
UDO violations are civil penalties and
That's
fines.
correct.
And I guess maybe later we have some sort of schedule of what those are, right?
Yeah,
What the penalties and fines
We
are?
have to make that.
Yes,
Revised.
there should be. I believe yours is a default $50 a day.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
okay. Yep.
Wes, going along with what Ron is saying, if it is not a criminal situation and it's a civil penalty,
Mhm.
what recourse does the town have for collection and enforcement? To me, it would be not much. Like you can't lien the property for a civil fine.
I believe you
Yeah,
can.
you can.
Yeah, you can lien the property.
Can.
Collecting that lien is
You can foreclose.
is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, you can file. There's certain acts that the attorney can file to help try to collect or encourage someone to.
But for $50.
It
But-
becomes a
but
$50 a
It's
day.
$50 a
a day.
day. It's every day that the fine continues. So
The violation continues.
that the violation continues. That's
And
correct.
my experience with this, you can run into a few things. One being that if it ever gets to the court, it has to be within a reasonable cause. So I couldn't find somebody get to the point where the fines go over $1 million for, having
Didn't roll their trash can
or
back.
didn't roll their trash can back to you. It has to be reasonable. The other thing is that you can put a lien on the property, but at some point you become so far down the totem pole, are you ever going to get the collection of it? But yes, you can.
Well, if it goes into foreclosure, but if it's a normal sale, you would still be.
X amount,
You
yeah,
can collect on the
you-
sale.
You
Yep.
can, and an X amount of things are paid first, and then if there's any money left, then it becomes a situation are you getting paid out of it. So
Well, Ron, do you have any objection to the change
I don't-
of
no.
criminal to civil?
I think, just want to make sure I understood what we're trying to do. But it sounds like, yeah, so there'll be really then a section saying that this is civil, these are the fines,
Yes,
and then describes how that will be administered,
yes, and they're in here, sort of
including,
intertwined, and we want to make a more clear enforcement section than it's
right. And there's
Yeah,
and usually some sort of appeal section or,
And yes, everything in any violation, notice of violation is subject to appeal by the Board of Adjustment.
right,
Any final notice.
okay, good. Got it.
You're suggesting we remove the 10 under 1.12, 1.12. Remove the 10-day requirement for issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Is any duration needed?
I don't know. My guess is there's no way that's currently utilized. That's not possible. Yeah,
CO has to be issued within 10 days of
after the erection of a building.
no.
Not happening.
No.
There's a lot of stuff that has to go on in that building
You guys
before
tend to do it within 10
before you
days
gotta
after
get-
final inspection.
Yeah.
No,
So
I mean,
I don't think you need to
because
put
the
a
way the
time.
building
All right,
code.
yeah,
I mean,
okay. I
it-
just-
Because they want to get a CO.
Yeah,
as
and
fast
if
as
they
possible.
fail an
Yeah.
inspection, if that's their last inspection, that permit stays open for a year.
Okay.
So it's a year after the last inspection. It goes once you
So
get
there is a time frame.
there is, but
window.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you have to once the permit's issued, you have 6 months.
Yep.
To get your first inspection. After that, it is a year after every inspection. So you could, if there's 6 or 7 regulated inspections that have to happen, you could do 7 years to build a house,
And people have.
and people
Yes.
have.
Well, I guess maybe I read this different, really. I thought what it was trying to do, the current one, is make you guys issue the CO within 10 days of the final, because it says it has been completed in conformity. So once you say, yes, it's conformed, you're done, you can't take 30 days to issue the CO. You only got 10 days.
That I can agree with you with. Yes, I mean
That's the way
Yeah.
I'm rereading it now.
I
That's the
mean,
way I read it the first
it very
time.
rarely gets to the point
I
where
know,
it's
you
at
don't.
48 hours after,
Right.
if at all.
But I think
So
No, this
Maybe-
says to be applied, shall be applied for. Certificate of occupancy.
it should
shall
be issued within 10 business days after erection or structure alteration or such being part shall have been completed in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance, which means the way I viewed it, maybe because it's the way it worked in my life, is that when you got the final inspection, it says it now conforms.
Yep.
You got
get a
10 days
CO.
to issue
Yep.
the CO.
Yep.
I don't know. It doesn't say what happens on day 11 if you don't
Yep.
do it, other than I show up at your door and saying, "Where
Yeah.
the hell's my CO?"
Yeah.
Right? But
No, I think
I
you're
think
right.
that's the way I read it.
Yep.
That it gives the town only 10 days to
Yep.
create the document after final inspection.
That's right.
Well, once it's applied for, you're right. Once it's applied for, we have 10 days to issue it.
Right, but it doesn't say what happens if the town doesn't do it. If on day 11, because all the town inspectors went out for a convention and they're not around to issue the CO, I don't see anything else that says the homeowner, I guess you can move in then?
Yeah.
that what
I
it's
mean,
saying?
a lot of people are usually in there anyway.
Right,
Even though they're not supposed to be.
We do need to have something that doesn't give the town.
Leeway to. Then let's leave it. I think that's really the way.
That's why I interpreted
Yeah,
it. Now,
yeah, yeah.
you guys interpret it differently.
No, it's been a lot has happened over since 2 weeks from now. So I'm rereading it that yes, I think that's
Right,
what it
good
reads.
point, Ron.
Yeah.
All right, so that's,
So we'll strike that and
No.
leave.
Now, we can then choose if we want to put a penalty on the town for not delivering within 10 days. Like that you get your inspection feedback, right? You get your final inspection
I
feedback.
promise you, Katie doesn't let me do a plan review outside of 10 days, much less issue a CO in 10 days.
Just kidding.
okay.
That's good.
Are we going to move into section 2? Not trying to rush it, but I didn't have anything else in section 1 that wasn't already addressed by Wes's notes.
I don't have anything until 2.08. So what was I trying to get at here?
You and I are on the same page.
I'm not sure I understood the whole thing at all.
I submit we go to 2.08 unless somebody else in the planning board has an issue with the comments prior to that.
I have an issue with 205, but let's go ahead and go to 208.
Well, no, do it. Let's do it in order.
Only one principal building per lot shall be allowed unless otherwise allowed by this. So no more than one principal building devoted to a residential use shall be allowed on except. I'm curious, we're going to be struggling with mixed use development within residential. And is this, and maybe I'm not reading it correctly, is this going to get in the way of potential mixed use development within a residential, for instance, a Sea Trails or a Jaguar's Lair if they build it, development?
So this is a provision that has evolved over time in a bunch of towns' regulations that were part of old covenants, and then they got into the zoning regulations, and it said you're only allowed to have one principal building or one house, for example. But it's really antiquated. We're regulating based on the zoning use. We don't also need to have this provision in here. Yes, it makes sense for one principal building in certain residential areas, but if you're zoned to allow for mixed use or commercial or whatever, you may have several different commercial buildings on a lot.
But in that situation, this clause wouldn't cover that. That would be addressed in.
Well, this could stymie it potentially. If someone were to say, "Hey, town, you issued this permit for this development over there, and there's more than one principal building on that lot."
But
That's-
you've
that's
addressed that,
in
though, by
violation.
your statement here,
Yeah,
which says
yeah.
provide exception for non-residential.
Yes, that's right.
Which may utilize more than one principal building
Correct.
on a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
And if it is residential, then the Board of Adjustment can potentially deal with it.
That would be a use variance. They wouldn't be allowed to do it.
Okay.
And so If it's mixed use, it would likely be in a non-residential. It would be in a non-residential zoning district, meaning that we don't allow any mixed use in any of the standard residential zoning districts.
We
Except
talked
in the
about
mud
that
district.
recently where it
Except in the
happens
mud
though.
district,
Yeah, I
or
mean-
an MB or the MB, but that's a business district.
But then we discussed that like last week where we now have a restaurant in a residential district.
Yes. I mean, and that's kind of where I'm going.
What?
We have commercial business, we now have a commercial, the restaurant is, I don't know.
The house
House.
restaurant that's in the back.
Correct.
Okay, now that gets a little murky because it's in what was originally designated as a amenity for Sea Trail.
Correct.
But what I think, and I'm kind of trying to set this up so going forward, we don't stub our toe on this issue of in communities from where I'm originally from in New Jersey, there are restaurants placed in residential communities. Okay,
Yeah.
They look like, walk like, talk like.
Yeah.
And they have multiple buildings.
Sure.
So what I don't want to have happen, I mean, if there's a way to address, I get why we want one principal building in a hey, we want
Sure.
one, but how do we create a situation where we can say to a developer that you do have the ability within this residential community to create clusters of commercial enterprises that service that community?
Sure. So that's a great question. And that would be a rezoning. And that would be a legislative rezoning. We're going to take it from it's residentially zoned. I'm going to petition to the planning board. I've got this proposal. We'll talk about conditional zoning at some point. I want to build a restaurant. You guys supportive of a restaurant in this area, the neighbors supportive of it, then we'll rezone it into that commercial district where it's appropriate.
You hit the nail. The neighbors are supportive of it.
Yes,
which
correct.
we would,
Right. Okay.
we'd go through
So in
that
other words-
process.
Because I know one of the ways that they're building now, or they're building, townhouses or blah, blah, blah. And then they have a street section where they have amenities for the people who live there, like a restaurant, like a pizza shop,
Mhm.
like a spa, like a gym.
Yep.
So that could definitely be coming down the pike as all of this land is being
So
built up.
That's the definition of our.
So
mud
they
district,
would,
too.
so that parcel where the commercial stuff sits would have, say if the whole development's MR2.
Yep.
And they want a big rectangle with some of that commercial stuff, like Sybil said, that parcel would have to apply for
A rezoning.
rezoning to
Yep.
MB whatever.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you guys could change the use table to allow restaurants in MR2, but I don't believe that
No.
you want to take that stance.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be-
So
Yeah.
what the procedure for
Yeah.
that would be when the developments pop up, I mean, when they plat the development, they already think they're going to do this. They would have to do it.
they would have to rezone it to be able to use that
So
land
part
for
of-
commercial.
Didn't you tell, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Didn't
Sybil.
you tell me one time when I was asking how we could get the land behind my area changed, you said only the owner could change it? So if the owner owned this big tract of MB2, couldn't he take part of it and change it to business?
Yeah, but he has to have permission from us to do that.
Yes, yes. So it would have to go through this process. You can't just, I can't just show up to town hall and say, I want to take my R15 and make it mixed use or whatever.
Right.
Without
I wanna
going
put a
through.
Dunkin' Donuts in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So in that case, this clause would be the way for someone who wanted to do this would be to come to the planning board and say, I want to rezone this area in a use case that allows me to do mixed use development.
Yes.
And then this clause would be moot.
Well, you need to add the
We have to add the
non-residential,
wording he's
the
put in to allow that
non-residential,
step to take
because
place.
right now it says multifamily, and so
Okay.
yeah,
All right. So
So
by
yeah.
adding that single word, we won't stub our toe on this. down the road.
correct.
Okay. Beautiful.
And I believe this is probably not enforced, would be my guess currently.
So it's just expanding to the exceptions to
Yep. Yep.
more exceptions.
Okay. So thank you. 208.
208 was the next one. I think Ron had it. You said it first, Ron, so you take a bite at it.
Well, my notes are not really good here, except I highlighted just removing amortization clause for 6 months compliance.
Well, if you're looking, I can
Yeah.
I can say under our definitions, I just think and I'm a quirk on proper terminology, but it talks about a driveway and a site triangle. The triangle being 30 foot along the street and 5 foot along the driveway, but it refers to the driveway dimension as being a height. It's not a height; it's a base, and I think that's going to confuse it to site distances based upon the dimension of overhanging trees that you can see under, and that's not what that 5 foot was intended to. 5 foot was not intended to be a height; it was intended to be a base length of a triangle.
Each triangle shall have a base measuring 5 and a height measuring 30.
Yeah, and I say and a base
And
measuring
a base
30
measuring,
feet.
yep.
Um,
When we're done, I want to go back to 07 just for a second.
why don't we go back to 07 now
Okay.
and then go to 08?
Does this street access issue, I mean, we've talked a lot about the differentiation between public and private roads. Does this apply to both?
Yes.
Um, all right, and whose job in terms of a private road is it? Who's responsible for enforcing that?
So this, and I pointed out here on 207, what our goal is that moving forward, I don't know what's happened in the past. You know, there's a lot of stuff. You know, if lots got created that were landlocked, that's it. We can't go back and
They're
unlandlock.
just non-conforming.
Yeah, they're just non-conforming. So moving forward, we want to make sure when there's a future subdivision that lot has street access
Okay.
or it has public access in some form or fashion, not the building. We're concerned with the creation of the lot.
You're not concerned with the driveway, you're concerned with the access to the lot.
Correct.
To the street.
To the street, correct.
Okay.
And so that would go into the subdivision section and then talk about, minimum lot widths, adjacency to streets, and that then gets into the whole bit about if you allow private access easements for small subdivisions. I don't know if you do. That's just a preferential thing.
Okay.
That makes sense.
In 2.08, and Chad, I guess this is, well, either one of you can answer this. It talks about a site visibility triangle, but it talks about egress to a street from off-street parking. When I think of off-street parking, I think of commercial. But isn't a driveway off-street parking? So that this section 2.08 applies to a driveway.
When I think of off-street parking, I think of Main Street on the island in the middle of the summer.
Okay. Isn't that a pickle?
Yeah.
I'm not bringing that up to talk about that specifically. I just want to make clear.
Because site distances there
Mhm.
are,
Bad.
I'm not going there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, and that's the example. I don't, maybe it was a bad one, but
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's just
So-
one example
So,
of site.
Pete, is your question then maybe that this needs to be applicable to our non-residential zoning districts and not residential zoning
Well,
districts?
that, as I
Yeah.
read it, when I
Yeah.
saw off-street
Yeah.
parking, I thought of commercial more
Yeah.
than a residential driveway, because then we get in monitoring where people's bushes are
Yeah.
and all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff on their driveways. And it could be a cul-de-sac where,
Yep. You don't, it's unnecessary.
yeah,
So perhaps I think that's a great suggestion. Maybe we need to put in a clause here that this is applicable to non-residential zoning districts.
does anybody have any issues with that?
Well,
Seems reasonable.
I just want the bushes cut
Sorry.
down by the driveway. You can't see unless you're in a truck.
Okay, so you're making a note of that. The next section, 2.09, I'll just jump in because I had an issue with it. We talk about temporary storage, and I think all of this is very good. People need to have temporary storage containers when they're building a home, when they're doing renovations, dumpsters, drop-offs. All of those are in the public interest, and sizing them and quantity and all of that is important. What we don't seem to address is box trucks. And I could, by reading this temporary storage, I could now park a box truck in my driveway forever. and I could use it for storage, not as a vehicle. I don't think that, maybe you'll read this differently, but I don't think that 2.09 prevents me from doing that.
I think the way you get into that is if you go, again, going back to the general code.
Yep.
All right, go back to the general code for a second. It's not going to bring it into land use definition. It's going to stay separate because then it gets into a nuisance violation, and there is nuisance codes for what we consider junk vehicle. Part of that,
Well, it's not junk vehicle, and I know
right?
know that.
If it's tagged and properly tagged, then technically, and it runs, technically.
I think it just has to be a registered vehicle. I don't
Yeah,
think it has to
license.
run.
Is there a commercial vehicle standard in a lot of, I didn't
I don't know.
read through your general code, but a lot of communities have a
Not seen it.
provision that says, you're not allowed to have,
I've researched it quite a bit in looking at designated spots for parking boats and Winnebagos and things like that. And I think that we're going to get into that
Yep.
further on in the UDO.
vehicle storage.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's
So we need to add a clause here basically that says the container only is more or less some language to that
yeah.
effect.
But a box truck, because it won't let you put a
Oh, you mean a box? Yeah.
a box truck, meaning
Yeah.
it's like a U-Haul.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A box truck is it's
Yeah.
usually a double axle.
No, I know what
but
you mean,
it's not articulated.
Yep.
But that would be, but acceptable under temporary. I guess the question is temporary is how long?
And, both you and I are concerned about the corner going into Twin Lakes, where all of those the things are parked there that shouldn't be because the business is being run out of a home. How do we address that?
I can't prove that.
Well, when it has the sign of the company
I know,
on the
right.
side of it.
But you're right here.
I
You're
know,
right
I
here.
know, it just drives me insane. But then we can make these restrictions, but it seems like then when it falls short is the enforcement of it. Who enforces it?
You issue a complaint, UDO administrator follows up on the complaint to see if it's valid, then potentially issues a initial violation if there is a violation, or final notice. That's, I believe, how the procedures are here.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
doesn't
if there's a violation of the home occupation provisions, you can submit a complaint.
Oh, they live there too.
Well, that would be, so you'd have to look at the home occupation provisions and see if they
Okay.
comply.
I didn't mean to get off subject.
That's okay.
Well, I know that many of the contractors around here will have a box truck in which they basically have a movable shop that during a construction period, they're going to back up to a house and that's where they're going to have their saws.
Mhm.
But that's fine, but it stops it here. Once you get a certificate of occupancy, you have 10 days to
Get 'em
cease and
out.
desist. I'm talking about somebody that's living in a house.
Got it.
They don't have a permit to build or renovate, or it's not storm damage, or it's not new construction, and it's there.
So we need to add a vehicle storage provision in here, which I don't believe you have. A lot of communities have vehicle storage that specifies that, you can have your work truck there if you live there, for example. I mean, you guys can regulate that they have to park that out of view if you want, but
No,
that's
too.
yeah. But there's provisions that you can put in place for vehicle storage, and we can put something together.
Just like a note under 2.09 that we try and address that better than we have. Next one I have is 211. Anybody got anything before that? We are just making.
You guys are doing great.
We are doing.
Hey, man, we'll
Um,
be out of here in
materi-
3 months.
Under material storage yards, it allows 211. Obviously, that's not in a residential neighborhood. It's not. It has to be someplace where a material storage yard is appropriate.
Mhm.
Your
Yes.
industrial uses type things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it talks about a 7-foot fence. But what it doesn't talk about is how high I can stack the crap. So, I mean, you can make a 20-foot high fence, but, well, obviously you're not gonna.
Mhm.
But if a 7-foot high fence with 12 foot of, junk cars is,
Yes,
so can we say something about you can't store anything above the height of the fence, the visual height of the fence, or some
I think we can.
wording?
The interesting thing about this one, this was one also that's not even in the use table, which is also problematic.
Ooh,
Um,
we got a twofer here.
yes. I will add a note about that. Pete, prohibit storage above fence height.
Sight line of defense. top
Yeah,
of fence,
there can be some wording. It can be higher than 7 feet, but when standing 10 foot from the fence, you can't, there's a sight distance angle
Yeah.
thing. It's reasonable.
Okay.
What, are you finished?
Yep.
Okay. On section 212, I want to know what a bona fide farm is.
That's a great question.
I'll let you have that one.
It's regulated by statute, and so long as you meet certain criteria within the ETJ or with any county jurisdiction in North Carolina, you're allowed to continue to operate that farm operation. It's typically in North Carolina, it's timber operations, silviculture, things like that is what a common one is. But you have to have very detailed records that stipulate that you are actually operating this as a farm and you're getting income from it and all these other sorts of things.
So this is really not something that really applies to us.
No. And that's why I've also said I don't know what in the world was going on when this was drafted. You got all this livestock and agriculture stuff in here that should not be in here. And I don't know if there's confusion that you needed to allow that, but the only place that if you want to prohibit agriculture, you can't in the ETJ so long as it's a bona fide farm. But I don't think you want livestock, et cetera, unless of your corporate limits.
Chad, don't we have a section of town right across from Town Park behind Krabby Hotwaters that is MR2A?
Yes, that is not agriculture or farm or anything like that.
But it's different than MR2 because I live in MR2.
Yeah,
and it's
yes.
different than MR2. It's MR2A, but I thought it allowed like chickens.
I don't know
That's not
why
a bona fide
MR2.
farm.
The reason why I understood why MR2A was created is because they got to the end of this document in 2012 and realized that they left part of that out, created it, threw it in. That's what was told to me.
Okay.
When I look at MR2A, because I've actually had to look at subdivisions of land in the MR2A, and again, for lack of better words, I don't quite understand why MR2A even exists. It doesn't really go to livestock and bona fide farms of that nature because the lots are not even big enough for it. Dealt with bona fide farms to an extent in my past experience in the county I served in before I came to Sunset Beach. And there's a laundry list of requirements that go into that. Getting established as a bona fide farm because there's benefits to it, such as zoning exemptions that you get from that. MR2A is not big enough. I mean, there's a lot in there that somebody's trying to subdivide that's too small to even subdivide without the particular person I'm thinking of buying more land. So I'm not sure why MR2A even exists. I know that's not why you brought that up, but it does not have anything to do, in my opinion, or from what I've looked into, with livestock and wild animals and horses related to it.
Well, in the 2 acre for horse, that kind
Yeah.
of blocks anybody from because
No,
they
I
don't
think-
look at horses as being
Mhm.
farm animals.
Mhm.
They look at them as being a business. Well, no,
Yes,
say business.
and so you also allow, we're not to the use table yet, but there's a provision in there for agriculture, so there's some things that need to be rectified. I think you guys are comfortable with the horses, correct? We're not recommending removing that.
Don't you think just A said that maintaining
Yeah, yeah.
livestock or
Yep.
wild animals on
Correct.
any property is not allowed?
Yep.
So the rest of it's not necessary.
But horses are.
Horses are allowed for 2 acres. I guess comes up to, I didn't go flip back to the definitions. We have definition of livestock and the definition of wild animal.
Yes.
Because that definition has something to do with it. Is a potbelly pig a livestock or a pet?
That's a pet.
Basically, I take this to mean that
For a while.
horses.
Then it's lunch.
Yeah, livestock would include swine.
Right. And some
Yeah, but a
chickens.
potbelly pig is not swine. It's Fred.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably there is where maybe they were trying to get to here is
Yep.
what some folks' view of livestock and wild animals is not the same. So I guess
Correct.
maybe my point really making is our definitions must be
Clear.
correct, consistent, and clear.
They are on
mean, I
this
guess
on this
If
matter.
somebody wants to keep one chicken as a pet, that's not livestock, probably. Or we're going to say because it is a avian.
There's a leash law in Sunset Beach. Right?
If there's an avian, if it's an avian, it's a chicken.
Walking their pig.
It's. I mean,
You bring up a great point. The only thing I could think of is
I mean,
that,
there used to be a time where a pet was considered a cat or a dog or a parakeet, but that has expanded.
Has
in
this
my
ever
lifetime.
has this ever come up? to
no,
your
I have not.
knowledge?
In my
I see
It
one of
has
our
come up.
spectators nodding head.
Wes has
Yes.
probably experienced it
Yeah.
more than
It has come up in
yeah,
other
and
places.
Mr. Forrester back here.
You're not being recorded, so it's
Yeah. No, I mean I've dealt with this in other towns I've worked
I'm
in.
not aware of Sunset Beach, but
Can you give your name and
Bob
address?
Forrester, 110 Crooked Gully Circle.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any in Sunset Beach, but a few years ago, it was a real contentious issue. I think it was in Calabash, either Calabash or Carolina Shores. That was throughout the newspapers where it was a potbelly pig.
Right. I kind of remember that.
And the issue was it's not allowed, or it was it allowed? So I mean, I know it was a very contentious issue there.
Wow. I think this becomes an issue is if it is running free in the yard.
Well, yeah, and we don't need to go
We're
down
not going down that
chicken route.
spiral, but
Well, I guess maybe what we need is a consensus of the board. I mean, sort of. What we're saying is we unless it's a bona fide farm under North Carolina laws
Or the horses.
or some
What you got
exceptions for horses,
Yeah.
any livestock kept for or wild for farming or biological research
Yep.
issues are not allowed.
Got it.
But what is the exception for what would normally be considered livestock kept as a pet?
Well, we we can't regulate everything, but the rules, what livestock is defined as, and wild animal, it's pretty clear.
We're trying to protect neighbors.
Yeah. Yes. No. I know.
So it's
So wild animal is typically is found in a non-domesticated state, or because of its size or vicious propensity, is potentially dangerous to persons. Livestock is, I think, addresses all the various classifications that you would want to address, and that is mules, cattle, swine, goats, which is goats and swine and sheep are often mules, cattle, swine, goats, sheep, poultry, and all other animals typically are kept primarily for productive or useful purposes rather than as pets. I guess it says rather than
Rather
as pets.
than for pets. Right?
We can strike the
strike the rather. Well,
yeah.
but okay. I mean, I don't have one.
Well,
but
I
if someone
don't-
has a wanting to keep one of those animals as a pet,
So
what if they've got 12 chickens?
well,
that's
production, I guess,
Yeah.
in my mind. But a single,
man.
well, I don't know. I
yeah.
guess
We're gonna
maybe-
go down a
I
rabbit
guess
hole
maybe
now,
we need to
but
question that
Yeah,
definition
yeah,
or
yeah.
review the definition at some point
yeah.
to make sure. I mean, the easiest thing to do is just say no,
Yes, that's correct.
right? Of anything that's not that's
A
in
dog,
that
cat,
list,
or a bird.
that's
or a
listed
parakeet.
in
So-
those livestock.
So, and Pete alluded to this, and he's correct. What you want to have is a provision in here that if someone's got one chicken or something, I don't think someone's calling an alarm. But if someone's got 10 goats and 4 chickens, there may be a legitimate problem there, and that we need to have something that would be enforceable that we could look to. And so I guess the question is if this definition of livestock is in fact enforceable. And I think we could just cut out and this is on page A-25 where it says, and all other animals that are typically kept primarily for productive or useful purposes. I think we can get let the end of that clause basically be stricken.
Period.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so it would say mules, cattle, swine, goats, sheep, poultry. I guess we can make a sentence about similar, although that leaves some matter of interpretation. But again, that could be appealed to the Board of Adjustment if they felt otherwise, that the UDO administrator, so if there's some type of animal that wasn't listed here, the UDO administrator could make
Llama,
Oh.
alpaca.
So you're talking about
There-
striking rather than as pets.
Well, I think that yeah, I guess we can do strike rather than as pets would be. But the question is, someone may say that I'm not keeping these for a productive or useful
I have
purpose.
worked in jurisdictions where you're in the town, city, or limits, like a municipal limit, where not allowed at all within the limits of the town, city.
Yep. So I think
Yeah, but I don't know if that would hold up.
we could say mules,
For,
cat.
you could be, nowadays, you could say that is my service.
Sure.
Mental service animal is an alpaca.
Yeah, but at least
Okay,
at least
so that's
they
not gonna
you
hold
make
up.
them prove that, or you make them state
Correct.
that publicly.
Right.
But
It's-
what is wrong with the livestock and wild animals prohibited? Strike the horses, and then maintaining livestock and or wild animals in any property located within the Sunset Beach planning jurisdiction is prohibited in
That-
discussion.
That's good. The question is, we need to make sure that our livestock definition is crystal clear.
If it's live in a stock.
Well, by removing the pets, that helps.
I think that
somewhat.
helps. I think that we could say,
But you
mules
know-
and like kind animals. Mules, cattle, swine, goats, sheep, poultry, and like kind animals or something, period. And I'm sorry, it's been a long day for me, so my terminology is perhaps something along those lines. We will come up with a definition. How about
Okay.
that?
Peacocks.
Yeah.
Right. I
Give
see that
people ideas. We're on record.
we're approaching 2 hours,
Yeah.
and I know we had left some time for public comments. Would this be appropriate to?
Or do you want to, can we vote to like finish section 2 and then go public comments only?
I'm happy to so move.
Did you make the motion?
Oh, I'd like the motion then, because we're
I'd
at
like to
2
get a
hour
head
limit,
nod from our people. Do you have comments?
that we finish section 2 and then go to public comment.
All right, that would be fine with me.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're going to finish section 2.
Okay.
The next one I had was 14, 2.14, which has to do with driveways.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And again, joint driveways at duplex units. I think the wording needs to be, we need to have continuity there, because it does allow joint driveways here, but on other places for duplexes, it says there would be a 10-foot space between driveways.
Right.
The joint driveway is certainly more efficient, so it should be allowed on duplexes.
And here we also get into our streets, because we start talking about the street type, right, a major collector and stuff.
Yes, all this needs to be under one roof, and it's all over the place right now. So
Yes.
under one section.
But I think we've addressed that.
Yeah, we have.
Up
Yeah.
to this point. The next place I had was 217. Does somebody have something prior to that? To me, it was confusing when underground electric service is required in the event of repairs and upgrading. I can see if you're building a new home, you want underground utilities. And you put that burden on the builder, even if there's above ground utilities on your street already. But in the event of repairs or upgrading, if I put a new roof on my house, does that mean I have to go underground with my electric service?
That's a very good point. And that's something that I didn't change, but I think that would make sense because I don't believe that Chad or someone is going on and saying, oh, you're repairing that building, you also need to bury your line.
We could say major repairs, which is a 51%
I was
value
getting ready
increase
to say the same thing. You could treat this as you do the flood ordinance.
Are you guys going to catch it though?
It's going to be something that we'll have to start paying, attention to. I mean, it hardly ever gets brought up. That's the bigger thing of this.
And the good thing is you've got a lot of underground electric
Yes.
already compared to a lot of
Well,
places.
Well, it encourages
So the
underground
choice would
electric,
be-
which is great during storms.
So the choice would be to get rid of it for repairs completely.
Yeah.
Or what I hear is maybe some middle ground when it's a major repair over 51%.
But
And then lead it there, which is probably a place where you would do it anyway.
Well, we have that ordinance in, which, because you grandfather in if you're doing 49%
Yeah.
upgrade, but then you have to use the new ordinance, follow the new ordinances if it's 51%.
yeah, the problem is if I'm if I'm doing a $20,000 kitchen reno on a tax assessed $40,000 house, then which doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm
Just saying.
I'm not running a line. I don't want to run a line underground. You know what I mean? So
Well, somebody tell me where there's a $40,000 assessed house around here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the point be, well, I mean, we would like to encourage underground
Yeah.
lines. Just
Yeah.
I think
back
this
to our
traps us
RCC
right now. It is not clear and it's it's enforceable, but
It's not.
we have to
currently
quantify the
enforced.
repair and the upgrading in 217. It can't-
Well, and section 2.17 does say underground electric service to all new construction is revolved.
Well, that's
That's
clear.
fine.
That's fine.
but then the next sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Workers shall be.
And honestly, I didn't catch that, Pete. So
Can this be something that in terms of this issue of 51%, should that be imposed on a homeowner that they have the right to go to the Board of Adjustments to
they can
appeal?
seek a variance. Yes. So you can put in 51% here.
Well, we already have an ordinance that
Yep.
requires that,
Right.
Yep.
but it doesn't revert back to, and that
This section.
it doesn't revert back to this section. Yes.
Okay.
So I think we need to at least tie it to that, saying that, and that seems reasonable. If you do, in most cases, if someone's doing
Yep.
essentially complete renovation of the property, we would like it based on our hazard mitigation and recovery, electrical lines buried where we can. So that seems a reasonable place to go.
Got it.
Okay.
I believe in 218, there's just a typo that we've carried on for quite a while, and it is in 218 C A 4, Roman numeral 4. It references 218 A 2. It should be 218 C A 2, and there's 3 occurrences of that in that. 2 occurrences in that section where it's just not referenced properly.
Thank you, Pete. Forgive
Uh,
me. I didn't want to touch that section.
But I'm glad. I hope nobody has anything.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that. I finally think I understand it
Yeah.
for about 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
then I don't understand it. Shouldn't be saying that in front of
What's the right
developers.
section?
218. 218
Yeah, but the correct reference is
is C, not A.
Gotcha.
because A doesn't have those. 220, maintenance of docks, piers, and bulkheads. I'd like to see something in either our definitions or in our applications that designate or that alliterate that bulkheads should be preventing erosion. And it goes into disrepair. Somebody can say their bulkhead isn't falling over, but if pieces of it are missing, the whole purpose of the bulkhead is to shore up the ground and prevent erosion going into the waterways or marshes or whatever it's supporting. But I think we need to have something in section 2.20 that references that a bulkhead must facilitate erosion.
Should we also
Protection.
include that our minimum height has to be X above the
That
X king
Maybe.
tide level
Maybe.
in 2050?
Well, then there's an argument as to what it's going to be in 2050.
so
Well,
I
we
was
could say it has to be a foot above the existing one now.
I was here when we put this one into place, and we had that discussion, and it was determined that it's really it needs to be a case by case basis because there's so many variables based
height.
on tide, adjacency.
You're talking about the freeboard portion.
Yeah, for height, yes, sir. Yep.
But what about? I'd like to see, because we're talking
but I
about
like
disrepair.
we could put in language in here in the purpose statement about erosion. Is that?
Yeah,
yes,
that's it.
yes,
That
absolutely.
the purpose of it is for eliminate erosion. Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, out of curiosity, who in the town's responsible for viewing the docks? Anybody?
Reviewing them is
Or for repair, recommended repair? Because, I could go down the end of Bartlett Street, come into the channel there,
it,
and that one whole section.
it mainly comes in by a complaint basis. So somebody
So-
calls it
But
in.
Dustin's the one that does it.
Yeah, Dustin would be the
Dustin
one
goes
that
down
to
and
take a
says
look at
this
it.
needs to be fixed.
Because that one house,
There's some bulkheads within the town that are on town property, down on the fish streets
Mhm.
so,
that are.
okay.
I won't go any further on that.
They won't conform
Mhm.
if we go to this?
They
Are you saying there's some that are town property that if
That
we
need-
add this,
that need to be fixed.
that would be not conforming?
possibly.
Okay.
Could I ask for a 5-minute bio break? I mean, I know we're coming down the home stretch here.
We can't refuse. So
We can't refuse. We wouldn't refuse.
Can we keep working?
Sure.
Richard will hear this as he goes out, but debris from building construction 2.21 on Article B or Section B, Paragraph B. It says, in addition, hazardous materials used during the construction process must be stored and disposed of properly to ensure that they do not enter surface waters. It should also say, or groundwater, because somebody could dump a contaminant out that could percolate through the ground, but it could be 100 feet away from, a waterway or a water source. But surface waters or groundwater. And that's all I had in number 2.
The only other question, though, actually, now that you just thought of it, having that removed during named storms.
What removed?
Well, this is construction debris. I want to make sure I'm in the right section there. The trash contained on the construction site in a receptacle. It's not required to be covered, right? A netting
High sides, must have high sides or covers.
or covers,
Uh,
so that you don't have flying debris in a named storm. In my HOA, when I was running it, I had all the removed there before the named storm. I told them get the containers out of there.
That's a HOA though.
Right. So we're saying it, So we got the covers to present airborne transfer of debris. I guess, is that sufficient? I guess. In other words, you got a container that's full to the top. There's boxes. There's wood sticking out. there's no cover in
Yeah,
here.
but the cover could be a tarp that's going to blow away in a
Well, it should be
Category 1.
covered and tied down, I guess, but I mean, because you would like to avoid projectiles, right? During
Yeah.
a mean
I don't know how to
storm.
regulate it
I
in
don't
this
know.
section though, but it's,
Yeah, because I can tell you that the town, the
Right.
last thing on their minds
Right.
on the storm coming down the pike is
I mean,
doing.
the only thing that we'll do is we'll tell the contractors, we'll kind of flip mode on them, is like, you need to prepare your sites for the impact for a storm that's getting ready to potentially impact the area.
Wes is right. We're taking the bathrooms off the beach. We're
Yeah.
removing all kinds
So
of
I don't know, maybe
trash
just the
cans.
way
Yeah.
we're changing this one. Well, I guess 2.21.
We're gonna add the groundwater clause on.
So I don't know,
on
maybe we just need
D.
to add something about covered and tied down or something.
appropriate securing in the
Covered
event
and
of
secured,
a
right.
storm.
I mean, you're right, covered, just throwing a tarp over it's like kind of a waste of time in general.
Cover
Well,
means you
but we
can't
don't,
see
but
it.
we don't really make them cover it now, right? There isn't a single container that's covered. So, okay. I mean, right now, if you got a trash container on
Well,
a
it-
construction site, it's wide open on the top. We don't cover any of them.
Well, but it's supposed to have higher sides so the debris is below it. But yeah, you could, it's an unclear.
Mm. I don't know.
How-
We maybe can't get there, I guess, but it seems like you're.
You can add a clause. There won't be any way to enforce it,
Yeah.
just because all hands are on deck.
Well, we could put a new UDO article that says in the event of a storm, everybody has to bring in their lawn chairs, their
Yeah.
beach umbrellas from the patio,
Well, but that's the
charcoal grills. There's all kinds of stuff that could become airborne.
right. But that's private property residing in. This is
Oh,
during construction.
Yeah.
They're under the permit at the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have a CO yet, is where this would apply. So we do have a little more influence.
True.
We can add a clause that says just construction debris shall be, accounted for or
Secured or something.
secured in the event of.
Well, it
of
does say they have to
pending
remove
storms.
it
Yeah,
if it blows away.
yeah.
It's their responsibility
Yeah.
to retrieve it from streets, property,
Mhm.
canals, beach, public areas.
Yeah, and I don't know what all the HOAs do, I guess. Nothing mostly.
I don't know.
I made mine pull them out before Florence. Get your garbage things out. But then he did it.
All right. Are we on to?
I'm done
2.2 or
with 2,
2.3.
but
Yeah. We just
Anything else on 2? And
wait
then
for,
we'll start on 3 next time.
now, should I be disappointed in our progress?
No, you guys did great. So this is exactly how it's supposed to happen. Does that make sense?
Wow.
All right. Yeah, and you'll get new material today, and so you can review this. I believe we're meeting the 3rd, correct?
Get it?
Is it for our
Third
next?
Thursday.
Can I do a request
I don't think we're meeting the
And-
3rd.
before we go on? As we continue this, if you look at his page and mine's not as good, when you print these out, can you leave a wide margin on the right-hand side? It's going to give you more pages, but to keep notes on,
Yes, I will try to remember.
make a wide right-hand margin,
Yeah, I'm
you know,
gonna
like a 2-inch margin to
to
the
put
right.
that somewhere. Yeah, I will.
It has not been decided if we're meeting moving this to.
Richard, to bring you up to
March 3rd.
speed, we finished with 2, but we only did one thing, and that is we added on section 2.21, we added that a contractor or builder cannot deposit, must properly ensure that they do not contaminate surface waters, and I added groundwaters.
Correct.
So you can't just dump chemicals in the ground. That's all we did, and we finished with 2. All right.
Pete, I'm going to ask a question. This really pertains to you. We only have one item on the agenda, March 3rd. Are you going to want to,
He's not going to be here.
I know he's not going to be here. I'm assuming you're going to want to keep this UDO meeting on the 17th so you can be present. Is that correct?
I'd rather, but I'm 1 out of 5. So
And can we make, arrange a travel schedule pursuant to us doing this on 9 o'clock for the UDO meeting, which is going to impact me in April? Is this,
do all of them need to be at 2 o'clock?
No, I mean, we don't want to upset Lisa or administrative staff on moving things around, but this meeting, I think, can be shifted to accommodate, to accommodate schedules. So sounds to me like right now we're scheduled for the 17th, March 17th at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and April would be the same?
Yes.
Okay.
And pending that these can be moved around a day or two or here or a week there.
Okay.
Well, I think Chad was going to the question, though, did we want to complete, well, maybe Wes is not available, complete this on the 3rd, to add completing our chart here on the 3rd. Is that where you're going, Chad?
I was bringing that to the question. I mean, we certainly
Or to
could.
cancel the meeting on the 3rd?
We do not need to do that.
Okay.
But if Pete's not going to be here, we can just wait till
Yeah.
the 17th.
Well, I'll be back on the 5th, so I can.
Oh,
I'll be back on the 6th.
yeah.
Unless you want to do it to the 10th. Skip the 17th.
You want to
but-
move it up to the 10th, or is it?
Let me look and see if that will work, and I'll
Is
work
everybody-
with staff and Wes tomorrow to confirm that, see if the 10th will work.
Instead of the 17th.
Instead of the 17th.
Okay. The 17th is an issue. I
It's
suspect.
not. I mean, I could potentially have a conflict, but you guys are the priority. The only reason we had to move this today was that's an 8,300 unit development so that's why I got it moved. But
It's not coming
you
to
guys-
It's not coming to Seatrail, is it?
yeah, it's right up the street.
8,300 units, that's all?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But anyways, so
Well, I'm
the
available the
17th is fine or the 10th is fine. So
Yeah, so we do the normal first meeting with a single applicant.
Is
on
is the 10th a problem for Jerry or Sybil?
It's a problem for me.
Oh,
I can't
okay.
come the 10th. I can do the 3rd and 17th.
okay,
Uh,
so it
so
sounds
what
like
is
we're
17th?
stick on 17th.
Let's just stick to the
then. Yeah,
17th.
Yep.
No green beer.
Well, I mean, I
You're
can-
right, St. Patrick's Day, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean, no green beer?
It's morning meeting.
Maybe I will do it in the morning then. So the morning is 17th. Okay.
Let's just not have it on the 18th then,
Yes.
Correct.
18th is out.
because I won't be ready.
So we have no public,
No public comments.
No, yes, we do. But I wanted you to come back to reconfirm
Oh.
that you didn't have anything else to
No.
add to the. Now, we finished with new business, 1, UDO review, and now we have part 4 of our agenda, public comments. Please state your name and address.
We've got yoga tips. With the right approach, there's a couple of things that I wanted to say. And I don't want to get into the weeds on anything particular. That's what you get paid the big bucks to do, is go through all of that stuff. I did want to make a comment. There was a lot of discussion about roads and cul-de-sac connectivity and things like that. There are people around that have had a tremendous amount of experience with regard to roads in Sunset Beach, private roads, public roads, roads that wanted to become town roads and whatnot. That me being one of them, that I've dealt with all kinds of people that have approached the town with regard to it, that could provide information that might be relevant to your considerations as to definite how you define it and whatnot. The second thing, with regard to the cul-de-sacs and connectivity, I'm definitely in favor of connectivity. There are many ways to do it, and based upon my 45 years of experience in planning and whatnot. And it's necessary primarily for emergency public safety. I realize it causes problems with individual developments and their concerns. But as an example, this is another opportunity where there could be some input. I mean, I've met when I was mayor, I met with people from Sandpiper that have, on a couple of occasions, they were saying, do something about it, do something. There's only one entrance to Sandpiper. Something goes down on Sandpiper Drive going in there, you could still get across the fields in the back, but there's no road entry. There are ways to do that. And if you have a road that comes up against an impediment like a stream or something other like that, or not really a stream, but something that where you don't have connectivity to, say, the rear of a development or something, there are things that could be done like grass pavers that would allow emergency vehicles to go across, but not with balusters that don't allow regular vehicles to go through. And and I caution you that it's difficult. It's impossible. It's not difficult. It's impossible to anticipate every single circumstance with regard to real estate. I mean, every piece of real estate's different. That's one of the reasons why we have a Board of Adjustment. So, like with a cul-de-sac, or connectivity, if you put in a requirement that there be connectivity, and an applicant comes in and says, "I can't do it because of the character of the land and whatnot," there's some impediment to do it. They could go to the Board of Adjustment and say, "I can't do it." It's not a situation they created. It's a situation inherent to the land. And that's one of the purposes of the Board of Adjustment, is to deal with those situations that are unique to a particular application. Just one or two other things.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. I want to encourage you. I would like to see, I think that applications need a review by an independent engineer on behalf of the town. I've had experience in North Carolina. I fought, not Chad, but I fought when I was on Board of Adjustment. Prior planning directors had said, we have to accept the sealed plans from a sealed engineer. I've been involved in developments where there were sealed plans by a sealed engineer that were in total violation of state laws and regulations and things that they didn't know exist. And there's nothing that protects the town. And I don't think it's unrealistic to require, and of course the fees can be charged to the applicant. The last thing that I wanted to mention is being a lawyer and a wordsmith, a lot depends on what you use, how you define things. Like when you're talking about pets or residential lots for single family, one resident, primary residence on a single family lot, depends on how you define lot. I think it also, when you were talking in past meetings about signs, the use of the word subdivision in signs, if you go back and look at your definition in the ordinance about subdivisions, you see how that applies to signs. And a subdivision is just a division of one property into two or more lots, which if you use the word subdivision to say you can have one sign per subdivision, if somebody came in and wanted to create two lots, they would be entitled under that definition to a sign. So all I'm saying is that how you I think you ought to be careful as to the definitions that you use in defining what's permitted and what's not permitted and things like that, because that's critical. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
Great point.
And I know you guys gotta go, but the Bob's right. The reason why I brought out connectivity is because it will be incredibly controversial, and you will be sitting here in the future, assuming you're on the board, of preliminary plats here, and they're going to connect through to a neighborhood, and you guys are going to be saying, "Oh no, why did we require that provision?" But so long as you're galvanized around the policy, you understand why it is that's in place.
One of the things I had requested of Chad is that he discuss it with developers so that at least we can be tooled with the reasons that connectivity is maybe good, not good, or good, and it would bring us all, give us an education.
Because clear, I mean, the sanctuary, for instance, just pulled that road through into the back lot of the shopping center, which is a great connectivity. I mean, we're all for it. Those kind of things.
And they're doing that for their own purpose, which helps everybody.
Helps everybody.
Yeah, you're gonna run into examples where connectivity is a great thing. It's where connectivity becomes a bad thing. It's where people are going to be standing room only in this building, and overflowed into that. And I've dealt with that. I dealt with that on a very case in Pender County right before I came here. That just got ruled on in less than 3 months ago, and I've been gone for over a year. So it becomes problematic. So
Is the worst place where you're connecting an existing neighborhood to
Yes.
a new neighborhood.
yes, and it was a 30, very small, built in the 90s neighborhood that all of a sudden 2,700 new units were connected, and the new developer had easement rights to that road, and it was accordance with the collector street plan of the county. And luckily it got approved with the person to the north donating the land use to that to allow a road to come through there, for it to allow it to happen.
We can encourage, we're not going to discourage connectivity, I don't think, by
No.
any of our terminology in the rewrite here.
Yeah.
But we could discourage cul-de-sacs, and so that doesn't really affect the one-up that you guys were talking about. But we'll see. And Bob brought up some very good points about definitions are very important.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add to before we gavel the meeting down?
Just that this was a very good session, and
It was. And Wes, thank you for your prep.
yeah,
That was
very well done.
that was a great way. It helped me to go through it, forced me to do it.
Yes, and you've got new material we need to make sure you get.
Okay.
I second.
For adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting so adjourned. And we don't have to continue.